You're welcome.
About a year ago, I was talking to a local friend who also would join this meeting from time to time about the beauty of the spirit of this meeting. And she said to me, if you want to go to a local AA meeting that has the same sort of love and spirit focus, she said, go to this meeting about an hour away from where we lived. And she said, go introduce yourself to a guy named Jimmy A and tell him that I sent you. And I did that. And I traveled an hour and 15 minutes to that meeting and was blown away by the hospitality and the generosity and the spirit in that room. And so tonight, it's really my pleasure to welcome Jimmy here to this workshop. This, I think, is your first time speaking here, Jimmy, right?
Yes, sir.
And so I'm thrilled to welcome you here, and we'll turn it over to you for the lead share. And when you're done, take your time. Then you get to call on a couple folks, and then we'll open it to others. So let's welcome our friend Jimmy.
Thank you, Chris. Good evening, everybody. My name is Jimmy. I am an alcoholic. Grateful to be alive and sober. And it's customary where I come from to let you know that I have a home group. It's called a Design for Living group on the Jersey Shore. I have a sponsor, service sponsor a bunch of guys. But most importantly, I've been sober since my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was on March 28, 1987. So extremely grateful for this way of life, extremely grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous, and happy to be here, I think. So thank you, Chris, for the invitation. Emotional sobriety. Well, let's start it by this. I played golf today, so if you think you have emotional sobriety on the golf course, you're nuts. For you golfers out there who know what I'm talking about right now. But I'm glad to be here, and there's a lot of good friends on here that I haven't seen in a long time. So I'm sitting in this railroad room apartment in northern New Jersey, overlooking Manhattan on the Jersey side of the Hudson River, and I'm getting the spiritual test. And the spiritual test looked like this on this particular day. This gentleman was sitting across from me, and he was peppering me with a few questions. And the first question he asked me was, how long can you hold your breath? How long can you be in a 12-step program and not work the 12 steps? The second question he asked me was, what does your relationship with God look like? And the best I can come up with is, well, I guess I'm a Catholic. I guess I believe in God, but what does really God have to do with all of this? The next question he asked me was, what makes you alcoholic? And the best I could stammer out of my mouth in that moment was, I drink too much. I had no idea what I was up against. And then he asked me a question that probably many of you don't believe, might not believe, but this is the way it was in my neighborhood in the 80s and the early 90s. He said, where's your big book? And I looked at him and I said, what's a big book? Now, I'm sure there was a big book at meetings. I'm sure there was a big book on a podium or at a literature table. And then he asked me a question. Well, it wasn't really a question. It was a consideration. He said, Jim, if AA works, why do you have so many problems? I don't know why I have so many problems. Now, I'm not embarrassed by my answers. I'm more embarrassed to let you know that I was 5 years sober in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous at that point. A very active member of a home group, and I was dying from something I didn't understand I was dying from. Something we never talked about. I was dying from untreated alcoholism. And see, when I was at that point in my life, I was under the delusion that abstinence was the solution to a spiritual problem. And like Bill opens up in his letter, I have these unreasonable demands. Bill says these adolescent urges, the urge for top approval, perfect security, perfect romance. Since AA began, I've taken immense wallops in these areas because of my failure to grow up emotionally and spiritually. And here I am 5 years without a drink, dying of this thing called alcoholism. And I'm still like a little kid in my mind. I'm still not being able to live life like, I should be living life, But what happened in that apartment that afternoon, sitting there getting that spiritual test, I started to realize that, my alcoholism doesn't come in a bottle, it comes in my mind. And my mind has a lot of delusions. And that one big delusion was what I just stated, that, I think that, abstinence is the solution to a spiritual problem. But I also had another big delusion, and that big delusion was that, I think that circumstances and people and all that other stuff is the stuff that's going to make me happy. And I fell into that trap like Bill talks about in this little story here. This delusion that external conditions, putting conditions on relationships, for example, getting married, thinking that's going to help me, getting that job, thinking that's going to help me, all that stuff. And Bill talks about those basic flaws when he says, I've always had this dependence, almost absolute dependence on people or circumstances to supply me with prestige, security, whether it's financial, whether it's emotional security, and the like. And what I started to finally understand that, you know what? The old timers used to tell me this all the time, that alcoholism is a soul sickness caused by a separation from God and a disconnect from each other. You see, I'm 29 years old at this time. Well, really, I'm 32 years old at this time in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got walls up between me and you. I'm not talking about all the things that are going on in my life. I'm under that delusion that if I just don't drink, I'm going to be okay. I got faulty dependencies on just about everything in my life. This idea of bringing down my walls, this idea of being vulnerable to you, this idea of talking about what's really going on inside. I don't even know how to do that. I have expectations on everyone to make me happy. I don't know how to make anyone else happy. But on this particular day, Bill started to paint a picture for me. He talked about the two goals of Alcoholics Anonymous, two goals that I believe in today. The two goals of, number one, the most important, don't pick up the first drink. But the second one is the one we really want to attain, and that's to step into the sunlight of the spirit. And what does that really look like? I sit downstairs at my kitchen table with many men through the years, and I talk about what that looks like, stepping out into the sunlight of the spirit, because that's really where we're going to attain this emotional sobriety that we're talking about tonight. Stepping out into the sunlight of the spirit, I achieve all the promises that the literature talks about. I start to have a relationship with God. I start to lose the bondage of self. I really live in a place of freedom. And as I sit downstairs and I talk to the men I sponsor, and as we sit at that kitchen table, I like to point at a glass door that's the end of my hall. And all I tell them is that in order to get free, I need to walk through that door. But in order to walk through that door, I got to do something very important. And that's walk into the darkness of my life and start to uncover, discover, and discard the things that are blocking me. One of the greatest readings I've ever read is in Daily Reflections. And I think this is really what we need to do, or what I need to do, in order to attain this emotional sobriety. On May 1st, if you look at Daily Reflections, it says it's a side of myself that I refuse to look at that rules me. I must be willing to look at the dark side in order to heal my mind and my heart, because that's the road to freedom. I must walk into darkness to find the light, and walk into fear to find peace. And the way the old timers used to say that in my neighborhood was, Alcoholics Anonymous is like a big bonfire. And many people in AA are just walking around that fire, but eventually that fire is going to go out. But if you really want to change, if you really want to have a relationship with God, if you really want to be recovered, you need to walk through that fire and get your ass burnt and feel the uncomfortability of change. So what I started to understand on this particular day, sitting with this guy as he's asking me all these questions, and as we're starting to have this conversation, he's starting to paint me into the corner. He hopes that I pick one of these two alternatives that are laid at my feet. Keep on living the way I'm living, or accept spiritual help. But one thing that was very important was that I understood that I have these delusions. And one of these delusions, this false dependency on people and circumstances to make me happy. When you live like that, you have a lot of resistance of going into the second step. Because the human ego doesn't think there's anything greater than me. And I think I could live a life of self-sufficiency. And yeah, I want you to make me happy. Yeah, and I want you to do things for me. And yeah, I want to be, happy, joyous, and free, as they say. But I want you to supply me with that. And unlike Bill, I never suffered really from depression, but I suffered from a lot of insecurity, a lot of fear, a lot of anger. So this contempt prior to investigation and looking at all stuff was really based on a lot of old ideas. The reason why I had a lot of feelings or a lot of insecurities or a lot of fear, like many of us do, is, partly because of the way I grew up. I grew up in this northern town in northern New Jersey. I grew up in this very blue-collar neighborhood. I grew up in a neighborhood where the only requirement for membership was 5 or more kids. I grew up where, everybody was a union worker. Everyone was a cop. Everyone was a fireman. Everyone was a tough guy. And I grew up very early. I'm 64 years old. I grew up very early, out on the streets. And when you start to live a life on the streets, the streets become your life. And though my parents always tried to give me morals and values and all the good things that I needed to succeed in life, I kind of rolled it up in a ball and I just tried to stuff it right down their throat. Because living a life on the streets and looking at the people that were partying and drinking and all the elders that were in my life were more important than anything. You know, growing up in this family and growing up in this neighborhood, there was always an occasion for something. There was always a birthday party. There was always a christening. There was always a graduation. There was always something going on. And the thing that was at every event was King Alcohol. And what I would witness as a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old, again, is the elders, my father, my brothers, my uncles, the neighbors, all taking that first drink, and they would change. It would be like a miraculous change right away. And what I would witness is that my dad, who was cunning, baffling, and powerful in his own way, he just became a different guy. My dad would walk in every night at 5 o'clock. My mom would make these 2 pitchers called martinis and Manhattans, and my dad would take that first drink, and all of a sudden he became a different person. But there were those nights. Maybe some of you guys experienced these nights where my dad would take that first drink and the rage would explode, and a tornado would go on in the house. And all of a sudden the plates would be going across the kitchen, or a kitchen chair, or one of us young kids would be flying across the kitchen because my dad's anger was intense. Now, that doesn't make me alcoholic, but what that does is it creates a kid that's filled with a lot of fear and a lot of insecurity. My dad would have been 95 now. He comes from that generation where really there was no hugs, no love yous, and all that other kind of stuff. He was a provider. And when there was a problem, he drank at it, or he got angry at it. So I'm a kid that's growing up with all this stuff going on in the house. And most importantly, what's going on in my house is something that doesn't leave the house. So we sought to keep secrets. And for many years, I had a lot of dark secrets. So deep down inside, I got this spiritual malady going on, and I don't even know what's going on. I'm building walls as a young age because I can't tell my friends what's really going on in my house, that my dad's a lunatic and he's violent and things go on that, you don't talk about. But at the age of 13 years old, I had my moment 51 years ago in a cemetery with 5 other guys. I could remember them to that day. I could remember that day like it happened this afternoon. And here comes that first bottle of Colt 45 malt liquor. I put my hand in it and I start drinking. Here comes that second bottle, Mohawk Blackberry Brandy. I start drinking on that Blackberry Brandy. And very quickly, I started to feel that feeling that we feel. And all of a sudden, all those things that I felt inside just started to disappear. And little did I know, on that day, I stepped on a road that went straight to hell, because within 16 years of drinking, I wound up being homeless on the streets for 2 years. And my life was shattered. And I always wanted others to make my problems go away. I always wanted others to fix me. I always looked for others to do things for me that I couldn't do for myself. And at 16, at the age of 25, 26 years old, I'm walking the streets of New Jersey and lower Manhattan, homeless, pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. And as my old sponsor would say, one day on the streets is just one day too many. And when you live on the streets and you're an alcoholic, things just happen that, no human being should go through. And my life was starting to go down the tubes. But what happened to me was I walked in a bar to panhandle some money one day, and a guy said to me, "Hey, Jimmy, you need to go to Newark Airport. They're hiring guys like you." And I went to Newark Airport that next day with 2 other guys. And for years, I couldn't tell you how I really felt. I'm 29 years old. I'm dying of this thing called alcoholism. I don't think I'm dying of alcoholism. I think I'm dying because of all you people and all the blame I'm pointing towards others. But here I am sitting in that airport, and for years I couldn't tell you how I felt until I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I read Bill's story eventually, and I opened up to page 8, and when he talked about his first step experience, where he talks about no words could tell the loneliness and despair I felt in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I met my match. I've been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. Finally, words to my bottom. And in the next couple of minutes, a complete stranger sat next to me. And when he looked at me, he said, "What's your problem?" And I spit up my life story on this guy. He said, "I have the answer for you." I said, "What's that?" He goes, "Is it possible for you not to take a drink the rest of this day?" I said, "I don't know. I want to drink right now. It's 10 o'clock in the morning." He goes, "Where do you live?" I said, I have nowhere to live." wherever I could put my head down. He pulled out a piece of paper and he wrote on that piece of paper an address, a street, and he said, "You know where this street is?" I said, "That's my old neighborhood." He put a number in front of that and he said, "Is it possible not to drink today and be in front of this address at 7 o'clock?" I said, "I have no idea." And all I could say is, but for the grace of God, at that night at 7 o'clock, I'm standing in front of this address, shaking, delusional, thinking, did I even meet somebody today? That's how shot out I was. When a 1979 Chevy Impala pulled up, and that stranger was driving that car, and he had a bunch of other strangers in that car, and he looked at me. When he pulled up, he rolled down the window and looked at me and said, "Get in the car." And they took me around the corner to my grammar school, where I had all sorts of contempt towards God, towards anything good. For years, I thought it was bingo. Who knew it was AA? And let me tell you something about my first meeting. Walking into grace doesn't feel like walking into grace. It felt like I was walking out of chaos. I didn't understand the enormity of what I was about to walk into. Because when I walked into that school, I looked into that cafeteria, and I remember being a sixth grader, a seventh grader, an eighth grader, just when I started to drink. I remember the rage that I had inside of me and the fear and the insecurity that was in me. But as I looked in that cafeteria, I thought about those years when I had those goals, aspirations, and dreams like many of us do. But I didn't understand one thing. I took the first drink. And after I took that first drink, all bets were off. And as I walked down to the end of that hallway, I met probably the most important guy we'll ever meet in the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. We call him the greeter. This gentleman put his hand down. I grabbed that flimsy reader and he pulled me into the room of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's where I met you guys. And I've been with you ever since. And I like to tell you that I got on that spiritual rocket ship and it just kept on going up, up, up and away. But that's not my story. My story has been, I've been hitting, I grow a little, hit a wall, grow a little, hit a wall, grow a little, hit a wall. And what I failed to tell you was that I walked out of a marriage when I was 4 months married. And here I am now in AA. And I eventually got back with that wife, and I eventually got the car, and I eventually got the house, and I eventually got the job. And to the untrained eye, it looks like normal living is the answer to normal living is a solution to alcoholism. But here I find myself in that apartment at 5 years, dying of this thing called alcoholism, not understanding why I feel the way I feel at 5 years without a drink in my life. And as I sat with that guy, Bill, and I started to understand what I was up against, when he started to talk to me about step one, when he started to talk to me about the physical allergy, the mental obsession, all that stuff, I started to get it. Nowhere in our literature is AA about getting us to quit alcohol or quit drinking. It's just quite the opposite. You can't quit. Lack of power is your dilemma. You have no mental defense against the first drink. And what was probably the most important thing I found out is that AA is designed to introduce us to the great reality, in my case called God. And that the wake-up call was we agnostics. And when I started to go into we agnostics and I started to look at some of the old ideas that had been driving me, I became willing to do whatever Bill told me to do. And as I started to look at that third step, I started to see the things that we talk about in that first step, that third step, especially that first line when it says the first requirement is that I be convinced that my life run on self-will has hardly been a success. And as Bill started to break down that third step and I started to look at my life, these faulty dependencies, this idea that you are going to make me happy, or money's going to make me happy, or a marriage is going to make me happy, or getting in shape is going to, I've always looked outside of me. I've always been a double-edged sword guy, where one part of me has always blamed everyone for the way I feel, but I'm always seeking and searching for something out there to make me feel better. And whether that's drinking, drugging, women, money, cars, you name it, stuck between that rock and a hard place. But I was willing to go into that darkness. I was willing to do something that I thought was a weakness, because when you live on the streets, vulnerability looks like a weakness. But what I didn't understand, it's really strength in disguise. And what I had to do was I had to start getting down the causes and conditions of the things that are blocking me from you and blocking me from God. And when I started to go through that fourth step and I started to look at the common manifestations of living a life on self-will, I got all that stuff on paper. And then I was ready for a long talk. And I shared that inventory with another man. It was probably the most powerful day I've ever had in my whole life, other than my two little AA babies when they were born. And I'll never forget taking that hour. I remember not coming home and putting my book on a shelf, but I remember going to a place called Liberty State Park that overlooks Manhattan. on the Jersey side. And I remember walking out on this pier, and I remember sitting down and opening up to page 75 and reading those questions and, asking myself, all the stones properly in place. And I remember just sitting there, and all of a sudden the tears came down my eyes. And I remember I remember this feeling like God was wrapping his hands around me. And all of a sudden I looked to my right, and about a quarter mile to my right is the Statue of Liberty. I looked across the Hudson River, and right in front of me is the World Trade Center. I looked to my left, and there's Ellis Island, all symbols of freedom in my mind today. And there I sat, 32 years old, free for the first time in my life. Maybe just getting a glimpse of what emotional sobriety really looks like. But then I fell for the trap, the biggest trap we have in Alcoholics Anonymous. I fell prey to comfortability. And all of a sudden, all the things that God was giving me back, all the things that were coming to me really quickly became more important than my primary purpose. So overtime, coaching baseball, coaching basketball, all those things are great stuff. And I'm not taking away and not saying that's not important, but all of a sudden that became more important. All of a sudden, the things I found objectionable and that fits that weren't so objectionable, all of a sudden the things that I wanted God to help me with was going to be on my terms only. And I hit the wall again, even going into the 6th and 7th step for the first time. I live on the ocean right here. I could take the boat out on the ocean, and I could point that boat east, and you could see the horizon. You can see the curvature of the earth when you're sitting on the ocean here. Beautiful sunrises. And if you point in that direction east, it always looks like the same. And I think sometimes my recovery gets like that too. I'm pointing east. I could see the horizon. Everything looks the same, but what I can't see is that I'm drifting from town to town to town to town. And sometimes when we come off the beam, we don't even know we're off the beam. But eventually, as I went through the work again, eventually when I hit rock bottom at 10 years, eventually when I almost drank at 13 years, I walked into a meeting one day after really blowing up my life. I walked out on my wife and my kids at 10 years sober into the arms of a woman who understands. And I blew up my life. I'm the guy who builds that beautiful spiritual structure up, and I tear it down with a senseless series of sprees. And you don't need to be drinking in Alcoholics Anonymous to blow your life up. Just sponsor a bunch of guys. You'll find that out. And I walked in a bar at 13 years without a drink, giving my sponsor about 20% of what's going on, thinking that I'm recovered, thinking that I got this, thinking that I'm really doing a good thing, convinced the lies that I tell myself. And at 13 years without a drink, I walk in a bar and I order a drink. And the bartender puts the drink in front of me. And like Dr. Bob talks about in his nightmare, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place because I don't want to take that drink, but God damn it, I need that drink because the pain is so great. And as the devil and the angel pop out on my shoulders, and I'm looking at that drink, all of a sudden a hand goes around that drink and the hand pulls the drink back. And when I look up, the hand belongs to the bartender who just happens to be a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he says to me, "What are you doing?" Apparently throwing my life away. And 2 weeks later, I found myself in a workshop where I would meet my new sponsor. And this guy, Peter, who many of you guys know, becomes my sponsor for the next 17 years of my life. And so we're going through the steps again, and we're doing a lot of work, and we're trying to really get down to causes and conditions of the things that are blocking me. I still have all these faulty dependencies on other people that make me happy. I want the perfect job. If I get that, I'll be okay. I want the perfect relationship. If I get that, I'll be okay. I want all these things that Bill talks about in his letter, and I'll be okay. But I'm stuck. I'm stuck because I'm being driven by a lot of old ideas. And how many times do we say to a newcomer, "Oh, you're willing to go to any length for victory over alcohol," and their head just shakes like a bobblehead doll? We don't even explain to them what that really means. Well, it's the same thing when it comes to the old ideas, because in our literature, 15 to 22 times it talks about laying aside our prejudice, laying aside our old ideas towards what? Well, let's start with everything. That would be a good idea. So this is something that's not in a book, but I think it comes from sponsorship school. Peter starts to take me through this process of looking at things, these old ideas that really drive me, the things that create the conflicts in my mind, the things that create all my troubles, the things that lead to an attitude and an emotion, the guiding forces of my life. So he has me look at 5 areas of my life, and he just asked me this question, what are your old ideas concerning your health, your money, your relationships, your family, and Alcoholics Anonymous? Because here's the question, my life should look like this when it comes to those things. And the minute that my life doesn't look the way I think my life should look when it comes to those areas of those things, I got the conflict, I got the resentment, I got the jealousy, I got the envy, I got all the things, all these character defects that are blocking me from God and blocking me from you. But as I started to unravel that stuff, as I started to see how this stuff, these roots that are under the surface that I don't even see that I've been acting and doing for the last 30 years of my life, when I started to uncover, discover, and discard them, I became willing to do something that was very important, and that's to live on terms other than my own. I could see my selfishness and self-centeredness like I've never seen before. And I like to tell you, I did that perfectly, but I don't. So as I went back into the 6th step, after writing another inventory and sharing that inventory, I started to go into that 6th step, and I started to look at things like I never looked at before. Many of us walk around in Alcoholics Anonymous. Bill talks about it later on in this article. We're like on a pendulum. One day is great. Next day, I hate her. Next day is wonderful. The next day, and what the process of the 6th step was starting to do was starting to get that pendulum of emotions to stop swinging so broadly. It's an action, I was told. What am I willing to stop doing? What am I willing to start doing? What am I willing to start looking at so I can enter the sunlight of the Spirit eventually? Have not finished in my amends have anything to do with me drinking again. Questions that were always posed to me, things that I was always taught. Sandy Beach used to say this all the time. This is where we dial in how much spiritual happiness you really want. So I was taught that I need to have some guiding principles in my life. So somewhere along the line, I don't know why I thought of this, but I thought of this. I thought of the 4 absolutes from the Oxford group. So every morning in prayer, I would bring those 4 absolutes into my prayer: to be loving, to be pure, to be honest, and to be unselfish. And every day I would leave my house after prayer and meditation, and I would get on my bike called life. And every day as I pedal through life, I would fall off my bike, and I would make those mistakes, and my character defects would come out, and all the things that block us from each other and from God would happen. But the real key here is to get back on the bike. You see, if we're teaching our kids how to ride a bike, when they fall off the bike, we don't pick up the bike and throw it in the dumps and say it doesn't work. It works just fine. It's about the willingness to get back on the bike, the willingness to admit my faults, the willingness to make amends when I've done, the willingness to practice step 10 and step 11 and step 12 in my life like I've never done before. But why do we resist this? Bill writes a very important paragraph in how it works when he says, as some of these we balked, we thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Why am I not willing to let go? Why am I resisting change? Why am I not doing the things I know that are going to benefit me and not hurt me? Comes down to one word. For me, it comes down to pride. And my pride is the essence of self-centeredness. And my pride is going to lead to all my other character defects. It's the head of the parade. And pride will always set in when I'm in spiritual stagnation. So step 6 was really about getting back on the bike. I was given a consideration once, which I think is really important for emotional sobriety. And here was the consideration. It's something I walk around with all the time. I try to bring it with me everywhere I go. The consideration is, do I look at people, circumstances, and situations in my life through the lens of a character defect or through the eyes of God? Do I look at people, situations, and circumstances in my life through the lens of a character defect or through the eyes of God? And I'm here to tell you that I look at through the lens of a character defect many times. Through jealousy, through envy, through fear or insecurity, or you name the character defects. But how many times do I look at people or situations or circumstances with compassion, with forgiveness, with love and tolerance? I have the honor and privilege of serving my area as the delegate to the General Service Conference. Love and tolerance sometimes can be quite tough to be understanding sometimes. It's quite tough not to have my opinion more important than your opinion. And again, these are all the things that block me from just this emotional sobriety. So step 6, what am I willing to stop doing? What am I willing to start doing? Which brings me to step 7. And what does step 7 ask me to do? It's a prayer. Prayer for what? Happiness? To be rich? No, it's really about being useful. And Bill talks about that right in this letter. The real stabilizing thing for him was having an offering of love, that strange drunk on his doorstep. That was Francis at work. Powerful and practical, minus dependency and minus demand, for fun and for free. So how do I be useful? Well, I have to be of service. And how do I be of service? I make myself available any chance I can. Bill goes on to say, in the first 6 months of my own sobriety, I worked hard with many alcoholics. Not a one responded, yet this work kept me sober. It wasn't a question of these alcoholics giving me anything. My stability came out of trying to give, not out of demanding that I receive. The paradox of Alcoholics Anonymous: we give it away to keep it. We surrender to win. We got 1,000,001 paradoxes in Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I started to be of service, when I started to do things for others, when I started to try to live these principles in all my affairs, for some reason, for one day at a time, my life started to get better. But be careful. If we rest on our laurels, we're headed for trouble. Right? And I've learned that numerous times through my sobriety. We get to carry the vision of God's will into all our activities. And when we do so, that pendulum just starts to stop swinging so broadly. We get to a place that Bill talks about is really the gift of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a place called right size, where, yeah, there's a wiggle room. That's life. We all have troubles. We all have adversities here. We all have trouble. We all go through things. In the last year, I've been retired for 22 years right now. 1999, I was in a horrific accident. I've had 41 surgeries, 12 back operations, 3 knee replacements, you name it, I've had it. Last year, my mom died of COVID. Been broke, been homeless, been everything, like many of you, right? But the evidence is all around us of people that have gotten through that stuff. And they walk through that stuff with their head held high. So this idea of just staying right size, staying in the middle, that's really what we want to attain. Bill goes on to say, we will find at the root that some unhealthy dependency and its consequently unhealthy demand led us, with God's help, continually to surrender these hobbling demands. So this is the importance for nighttime inventory for me. This is the importance of 10-step spot check inventory throughout the day. Where am I right now? Putting a spiritual mirror out to myself. Am I disconnected from power right now? Am I asking something for nothing? Where am I in this moment? Am I being resentful, selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Am I talking to my sponsor about that? Am I calling my sponsor up on that? Am I writing maybe some 4-column inventory? Am I sharing this with another person? Am I even making amends if I've made a mistake? Am I resolutely turning my thinking mind towards helping others? And then at night, when we retire at night, am I really doing that? I do a nighttime inventory with all my sponsees on a nightly basis. We need accountability. Alcoholics without accountability are not very useful. So it's important that I reach out to my sponsor, and then my sponsees reach out to me, and we keep each other accountable through our nighttime inventories. And we share that stuff with each other. And what eventually happens is that place, we get to that place. where it's not really important what's out there that's going to keep me happy. It's what's going on inside of me that's going to keep me happy. That's going to keep me connected to you and keep me connected to God. Am I willing to move away the stones and the walls that I build? Am I willing to allow you to come over the walls that I build and to share your life with me? Because I think that's what Bill is really talking about. Because I could talk to you about a lot of different things. I could talk to you about the traditions, the concepts. I could talk to you about the structure of Alcoholics Anonymous. We could talk all day about a lot of things. But when it comes down to it, it really is about putting everything into a funnel. And when it comes out of the bed at the bottom, it's about one thing and one thing only. One drunk talking to another, sharing our experience, strength, and hope with each other. And when we do that, I think we attain that emotional sobriety. We attain that thing that, as my good buddy Tommy always says, it's the unfair advantage. Not many people have what we have. And that doesn't make us sound like we're more important than anyone else. We've just been put a spiritual toolbox at our feet. And when we pick that up and apply it to our life, well, I think what Bill talks about at the end of this letter, it says it. It's not really a new idea. AA has been around for 87 years. Alcoholics have been doing what we're talking about for a long time. Only a gimmick that has started to unhook several of my own hexes at depth. Nowadays, my brain no longer races compulsively in either elation, grandiosity, or depression. See those two, that pendulum doesn't go left to right anymore. And that's been my story. I've been given a quiet place in bright sunshine. And I like to think what he means is he's living in the sunlight of the spirit. He's living in that place out there. And it's really easy to get out into the sunlight of the spirit by applying these 12 steps and by helping somebody. And to let God take away these faulty dependencies and these expectations. You know, seeing this idea in step 3 about selfishness and self-centeredness, the root of my troubles, and my troubles are of my own making. Can I see that on a daily basis? Can I see the things that block me from you and from God? And that's the importance of inventory for me. So we get to live in the sunlight of the spirit, free. We get to experience all the promises that are in our literature. We get to have a relationship with each other and with God with no strings attached. We get to experience peace and serenity. And for an animal like me, who just roamed the streets for years, not knowing where my next meal was coming from, not knowing where my next dollar was coming from, not knowing where I would wind up in my life, God brought me to Alcoholics Anonymous. And on March 28, 1987, when I walked into grace, I understand it's grace today. It's a gift. Emotional sobriety is a gift. And how do I handle a precious gift? Bill gives us great example in the 12 and 12 and step 12, and he talks about this priceless gift. What I do with this priceless gift is probably the most important thing that we do, and that's to give it away in abundance. And when I give it away in abundance again, my life is pretty good. So I think I'm, what time is it? 9:18. I think I'm done, Chris. That's all I have. Thank you.
Jimmy, thank you so much. My goodness. I need a minute to process everything. It's I'm deeply grateful for your heart, for your sharing tonight. What we've been doing week after week is the lead share gets to pick about 2 or 3 folks on here that you'd like to hear from, and then I'll open it up to others, and they can share on their own. So is there anyone you want to hear from? You're muted, Jimmy.
So let's hear from Sam.
Hey, Jimmy, what a great share, man. Thank you. I'm Sam, I'm an alcoholic. And, I think you hit every note through this. And it's funny how, my current experience is that over the last few weeks, I've given a few talks and I've just felt really flat, like I just didn't really have a lot going on, and a lot of, and the guys I was working with, I just didn't feel like I had a lot of light in me. And man, the funny thing was I've been sitting on this resentment inventory, which I thought was kind of a bullshit inventory. It's like, man, I'm 22 years sober. I've got, this is just a one that's kind of like, I get to it when I can, And I was like, man, you got to write in this. You got to get on there. And I realized I had a few of these resentments that were just eating my lunch, and I didn't think that they were that big. It's funny how my pride comes in at a long time sober and says that somehow time is a antidote to alcoholism. It brings that delusion back up to me, and that whole like pride comes in like carbon monoxide. And before I know it, oh, that's just a bullshit little busy work thing that I'm doing with I do it along with the guys I sponsor sometimes after we do an inventory. I do an inventory with them. And this is just kind of one of those bullshit ones I didn't have time to complete, and this, that, and the other. And man, when I got into that, man, it ripped me open. And then I realized I've been walking around with like this Messiah complex, and there was some kind of deal that there was this great feeling inside of release where I was like, man, you have a seriously over-exaggerated sense of self-importance. And it wasn't like I was beating myself up with that. It was like a relief to feel that way. Like I just felt all of a sudden relief. I'm like, God, man, you've been letting your ego run this show all over the place lately. So I love the essay. And again, I don't know how to articulate this correctly, but the process of identifying these faulty dependencies and demands, like these are just things that I start to identify after I remove the alcohol. These are new things that my alcoholism just attracts and likes to, and they've always been there, but they're just another thing that that turns up the volume on, that my alcoholism can turn up the volume on when I'm not treated, when I'm not living in the spiritual solution. And, it's always so great to hear you, Jimmy. When Chris said he had you coming in, I was super excited, and I really appreciate you. I look forward to seeing you next month, man. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Sam.
Who else would you like to hear from?
Let's find a female that needs to share. How about Sarah in Virginia?
Hey, I'm Sarah. I'm an alcoholic. Can you hear me? Okay, sorry. Well, thank you so much. That was so awesome. I really appreciated you being so honest and hearing your story. It's just so baffling, this malady, honestly, and the way it sneaks up. It just, for the past 2 weeks, I kind of went off of my regular program. My sponsor went to Mexico, so I wasn't really in touch with her as much. And I just stopped coming to meetings because, I'm a single mother and I had my kids, and other worldly clamors just started taking priority very quickly. And it's just so funny how it happens. And then, of course, just 2 weeks into it, it ends up with me in an explosion and owing a whole bunch of apologies. And that's how the spiritual malady shows up in me. It just takes over very quickly. The self-reliance. I naturally just always want to default to self-reliance, and I really have to be doing the disciplines every day. And when I'm in that mindset, waking up in the morning, doing my 11th step, practicing steps 10, 11, and 12 in heavy rotation throughout the day. And in that mindset that I'm being reliant upon God, I just it's not that I'm always happy necessarily, but I get through the day a lot better. And, I went through a long period of time. I was, chopping wood, carrying water. That's how my sponsor puts it. You always got to chop wood, carry water, whether things are going awesome or whether they're going terrible. So if you just get in the habit, it's just going to be natural. And I just know how much better off I am when I'm actually doing those things and remembering God, and how much better the people around me, how much better off they are. It's amazing. It's just baffling. The thing that's so weird about it is just how it's like a parasite. Like it just kind of sneaks in like that, and all the work in the world, we truly have a daily reprieve. So I'm so grateful to always get to hear an awesome message like yours. So thank you.
Thank you. I'd rather go to a show of hands, Chris. I don't know. Is that somebody need to,
You
let's
got
see.
one more person to call on, and then I'll open it up.
All right. About, let's go to Maine. I like Maine. Let's talk to Tom up in Maine.
Hi, Jimmy. Thank you for your share tonight. I really, really appreciate it. Got a lot out of it. I really kind of honed in on the thoughts about, taking care of ourselves, because we never know what life's going to throw at us. I think you kind of referenced that throughout your whole talk, and I think that's so true. It isn't about the amount of time we have in this program. It's about how we're living our lives every day. And what I found is that 12-step recovery and specifically, AA has really helped me in my life. And, when things are good, I need the program. And then when things are really challenging, I need the program. So I think it's the consistency. And my wife has been teasing me for the last 9 months about meeting stacking. And because of COVID, I've been inside a lot. I have COPD. When I go to the doctor, I do the pulmonary function test. My lung age comes out at 156 at the top of the report. So, when you're being told that your lungs are 156 years old, you're kind of thinking, well, okay, maybe I'm not buying green bananas this week. But I think the piece is that through it all, and working a program, working with what I call my board of directors, which is my sponsor, and about a half dozen other people who are in the program that I count on, I'm able to navigate things and have a blessed life. And that wasn't the way it was, 30 years ago. So I don't take anything for granted. And your message tonight reinforced the importance of emotional sobriety. And I'm very grateful for my cousin Dave H., who steered me to this meeting and allowed me to have a weekly dose of a positive reinforcing message about what life can be if I stay right in the middle. And thank you all, and have a great week.
Thanks, Tom. We're going to go ahead and open it up for anyone who'd like to reflect or share what Jimmy's share brought out in you tonight. And even if this is your first time attending, we'd love to hear from you. So just raise your hand on here and I'll call on you as I see it. Yeah, Nadine, good to see you again. Would you share with us? Nadine, you're muted.
How about that? Yeah, thanks so much, Jimmy, for your share. And Nadine, I'm a grateful Al-Anon member, and I related a lot. Firstly, the thing about, every 5 years, there being like difficulties, and I didn't get a program that was, useful to me and the people around me for 15 years. So I struggled a lot in, just going to meetings, and I thought I had something, and I was just like dying inside. And the other thing that really spoke to me was when you talked about the 5 areas, and I was thinking, oh yeah, I'm okay with all these areas. And then you said money, and I thought, there's something, because I seem to be powerless over that at certain times. I think I'll be doing okay, and then I'm not doing okay, and sort of on track, off track with money. But yeah, so the next thing to look at will be that. And I regularly go through the steps, sometimes in a group with like-minded friends, or, you know, write resentments out with my sponsor. So there's a way to deal with it. But the thing, what you said about pride underpinning all that, it's like, oh no, you know, I should be doing better than this. I should be able to manage my finances after all this time. And, you know, I tell myself I'm doing okay. But there's always an area to improve. And there's been a lot of difficulty lately. And God's taken me through those times. And I'm sure that I'll be taken through this, like what seems to be a fairly small problem, really, my spending. But yeah, it's really good to be in meetings like this. And I always hear something that's useful. So I'd just like to thank you very much for your share, Jimmy. It was really great.
Thanks, Nadine. Deanna, would you share with us?
I'm Deanna, I'm an alcoholic. I'm sharing tonight because I really need to share. I really heard a lot of what you had to say tonight. I appreciate it. I took 2 pages of notes because everything that we were talking about, the faulty dependencies, you know, I've struggled financially like most of my life, and I finally got this really good job a couple of months ago, like beyond my wildest dreams kind of job, you know, that I never thought I would have. And I'm miserable. I'm miserable because I feel like I'm still trying to prove that I'm good enough for it. I'm trying to prove that I can do it, that and I'm putting so much effort into it, working so many hours, and you know, everything else in my life is going to the wayside, and I'm miserable. And it's starting to come out in the way I'm treating people and the way I'm acting at work. And you know, been talking to my sponsor, and she's like, why is it? What's going on? What are you depending on? And it's like that prestige, and that you know, I'm the first one in my family to go to school and get a degree. I'm the first one in my family to get a good job. You know, I'm trying to, it's almost like I'm carrying the weight of my whole family on my shoulders, that, you know, I have to prove that we're, you know, we did okay or something. That I can do this myself. And then I'm getting mad because I have this expectation of myself that I'm supposed to achieve or accomplish so much. And when I don't meet that requirement, or I find it difficult to meet that requirement, I'm angry. You know, why is life so hard? Why does this have to be so hard? And you know, I'm just like, where's my faith in God? Where's my trust? Why am I putting all of my happiness and worth in this? It's almost like the gifts of recovery are, you know, making my life hard. I don't know. I'm struggling with the success. I don't know. Like, I don't know. I just know that I need to be here. I need to hear what you guys are saying, because a little bit of it creeps in, and I'll think about it over the week, and then a little bit more creeps in. And, you know, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for this meeting. I started coming to this meeting right when COVID started, and I had just come back from a relapse. I had 8 years of sobriety and came back after a 5-year relapse. And you guys speak the truth, and I can come here and I can talk about this stuff, and I'm not alone. And I think I'm gonna shut up now. Thank you.
Thanks, Deanna. I'm glad you're here. Keep coming back. Emerson, we're going to go with you next.
Hi, everyone. Emerson, alcoholic addict. I love this meeting, Jimmy. That was I was like a master class. I really loved it. I really did. I felt what you were saying, especially about how we see things through our character defects. I was in a meeting last week and I heard this phrase and I'll never forget it. This, I think it was a lady said, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. And I
Yeah.
thought about that like, oh man, if I'm seeing things through all of my fixed ideas, prejudices, fears, all that, I'm not seeing anything close to reality. And I also liked how you were very transparent about, you've had hardships, you've made mistakes, but the picture you gave of like, when we're not emotionally sober, the pendulum swings like this, but when we're emotionally sober, it still swings, but maybe only like this. And that to me is a very, it's a really good example of like, if I could put words to emotional sobriety, that's what it would look like. Helping others is what saves us. And I could be talking to other alcoholics, just helping people. I mean, whatever, anything to get me out of myself, because when I'm up in here, I'm in really bad company. It can be a really tough neighborhood. And I need to follow these basic principles that we have in this program in order to be somewhat happy. Well, no, to be happy, healthy, sane, all of those things. Because one of the things I know that really attracted me to this program was I stayed around long enough to actually see that it works in other people. I think Bill says that somewhere in the book, that, we see that this works in other people. And that was what I needed. And I saw other people, I saw people that were like me, that weren't like me, that had a past like mine, that didn't, male, female. It didn't seem to matter, as they were willing, as you said, to pick up that simple kit of spiritual tools. So I really related to what you were saying. And yeah, I felt it. Thank you.
Thanks, Emerson. Arena, next. Am I getting that correct? Can you go ahead and unmute yourself?
I have unmuted myself. Thank you. You did a very good job saying my name. It's Irena, and I am an alcoholic, very much so. Jimmy, thank you so very, very much. You rang a lot of bells for me. I really had the same experience of being, I think it was 5 years sober and wanting to kill myself, not knowing that I was doing all the things. I was doing the prayers, I was doing the meetings, I was doing everything. I did not know that I was suffering from untreated alcoholism. And that went on for a good number of years. So it's very comforting to know that I wasn't alone in that situation. And you just described it so well. There's so much that you said, as was mentioned earlier, am I looking through God's eyes or through my character defects? Wow, that was so powerful. And then my big takeaway is my sponsor and I have been going back and forth about doing a principles inventory and really haven't gotten our hands on exactly what that means. But you really inspired me to sit down and get very serious about looking at my old ideas and how they're impacting my life today. And I really appreciate everything you said. Thank you. Glad you were brought here. And I hope we see you again. That's all I have.
Thank you, Irena. Gigi, and then And then Sarah, you'll be next.
My name is Gigi and I'm an alcoholic. I don't know if you can see my picture. I'm in a hospital here. I'm in a hospital because I broke my leg and I have brain cancer, but I don't like to complain. So Jimmy, I'm so glad you shared identify. That's what we used to say, identify. I remember when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous in New York at a place called Forklifter. The fork was really lifted. I was so dependent to alcohol sitting in the bars in New York. So I became very independent and started a really good life, got married, good job, etc., etc. But now being here in the hospital, I've lost all my independence and I get very worried, angry, self-pity and depression. Thank God for the grapevines, because my sponsor, when I came into AA, gave me the grapevine, and got the grapevine for years and years. And then I found this story from Bill Wilson about emotional sobriety. Oh my God, I couldn't believe reading it. It's all about love. And I don't know what was getting me so depressed today. I just got my husband came to the hospital, brought me a card from my old boss who just died, and it brought back bad memories. A lot of people taking advantage of drunken women, and I always say to my sponsees, when you're a drunk, you're a nobody. And that's really what it was. I was a drunk and I was a nobody. Yet I felt I was free and independent and left my country. When you were talking about your childhood, here, all the nurses, it's a lot of love here. And it's all about loving and loving others. And I had a very good mother, but she had a lot of issues and I had a lot of anger and I didn't have any love. So alcohol gave me the feeling I was loved like crazy and traveled all over the world. I became a jet setter. Anyway, ended up in New York. I don't even know what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter. My sponsor I have now, she says, Gigi, you don't need to explain yourself. I don't know. I have this tremendous need. I have to explain myself. And my husband comes here and he tells me he loves me. And I said, I can't believe this. Here I'm a vegetable. And the man comes and tells me he loves me. So it's all about forgiveness and love. And thank God for emotional sobriety. And thank God for Bill Wilson's writing. I have all his writing. My other sponsor gave me this about emotional, no, I forgot the title, where all his writings is. Oh my God, just reading his writings, and even though it's a foreign language for me, I identify, and what a gift. And this meeting here, my sponsee, she has sent me a letter where there are all these different meetings you can go on Zoom, and this is one of them, emotional sobriety. And we talk a lot about that. So anyway, I'm very grateful I was able to do it because I was getting very depressed because I'm going to get out of this hospital and I hate change. I got used to it. I got used to everybody here. That was very difficult. But with AA, I got used to it. And now I'm going to go home next week and I should be happy. But right now I'm getting very depressed. Worry, anger, self-pity, depression. That's my MO. And thank God I know it. I find it out in my 4th step. And you were talking about the 6th and 7th step. I love the 7th step when I read it and it says, fear of losing what I already possess. What am I possessing? I used to think I possess the love of God. And he's been with me from the day I was born and saved me. And he's saving me now too. So thanks for bringing this meeting. And thanks for all the love and service you give. And thanks for my sobriety. Okay, I'll let it go now. Thank you letting me for sharing.
Thanks, Gigi. Really grateful you found this meeting. Sarah H. And then if anyone else wants to raise your hand, go ahead.
Hi,
Sarah?
everyone. I'm Sarah and I'm an alcoholic. Jimmy, that was really, really wonderful. There was a lot in there that I truly identified with. And for me, I find that, that identification, I mean, when we get here, we have that identification, but to me, it goes further than that. That identification is invitation, because when I can identify with you, then I feel invited into your world. And I feel like when I can, and somebody identifies with me, then I present an invitation to them to come with me, let me show you how I've done what I'm doing. I loved what you were talking about how we can reach those points in sobriety where we're just not doing what we're supposed to be doing, or we're just not doing enough, and we become complacent. In my area, I mean, I am 25 miles from my home group and 40 miles from my women's group. So it's real easy to get complacent. And I live in Iowa, Southwest Iowa, very rural. And it's really easy to get complacent, especially in the winter when there's blizzards going on, or in the summer when you've got, you might have tornado warnings or whatever, I don't know. But, I found that one time I started getting really complacent and, thinking, I don't need that meeting tonight. I don't need to get in my car and drive. I think one of our sayings on the wall should be get in the car, because my emotional sobriety has happened a lot in the car. But, I'd start getting to that point. And then I once heard a speaker say that she went back out with 19 years of sobriety. And what she said has stuck with me ever since. She said that the life that AA gave her got in the way of her AA life. She had started having all this wonderful stuff happening in her life. And then she was concentrating on that. She got married, had kids, went to school, got degrees, got good job, all the trappings, but the life that AA gave her, that all that stuff, all that gift that AA gave her was about to be taken away from her. I mean, was taken away from her because she went back out and drank. She forgot all about AA. And that's what had given her that life. And just real briefly on both the third and the seventh step prayers, in the third step prayer, it's not about making us feel better. It's about how can I better do thy will? And the seventh step prayer talks about, please remove those defects of character which stand in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. I'm finding God lets me hold on to a few of those because they serve as a warning. They are useful. They serve as a warning, not an example. So I get that. I have to be wary of what is being removed. And to me, 6 and 7, I loved what you said about 6 and 7, because to me, that's our turning point. When we get through 5 and then we ask those questions and we review the first 5 proposals, and then we get, we ask those questions about mortar and sand and all that stuff. And are we ready? Well, if we're check on the first 5 proposal and answering those questions to our satisfaction, then we are entirely ready to have God remove these defects as he sees fit, though. We have to remember that's as he sees fit. So, and that's our turning point where we stop concentrating on what we've been doing and where we're at and what's happening with us, to taking it out there and being those examples and giving that gift away, and just really, I mean, you really hit me on so many levels on this talk, and I really appreciate the gift you gave us tonight and the grace of God you gave us. Thank you.
Thank you. Angela, is your hand raised?
Yeah, hi, I'm Angela. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks, Chris, for sharing. Thank you, Jimmy. I loved a lot of things that you said, like walking into grace. You didn't realize it. You felt like you were walking out of chaos. And AA introduces us to the great reality I call God. And vulnerability is really strength in disguise. And I like when you shared about 41 surgeries, and I see you up and functioning and talking in a meeting, because I had 12 surgeries and I need about 3 more. And sometimes I get so down on myself with the pain, and I just want the pain to end. And I just get so, poor me. And the things I do to stay out of it are, I help others. I volunteer for an organization that is dear to my heart. I help others. And I do service in my home group, my Big Book Step Study. And I love this meeting because it talks about the solution, I identified with you being homeless. I was homeless too. I had a cardboard condominium in Manhattan. We were fighting over it. I took some guy's cardboard box, and he says, "This is my box." And but I went home like the prodigal daughter. I went home and realized my mother's gonna give me food to eat and a shelter and a roof over my head and a bed to sleep in. And I knew I was forgiven. And so you're right. It's all about looking through the lens with the eyes of God, with compassion, forgiveness, love, and tolerance. That's what St. Francis was all about. And if we could sort of emulate, and think of that prayer when we're really down on ourselves and when we really want to give up, it helps keeps us going. There's always somebody we can help, whether it be a neighbor, a family member, a dog, a cat, somebody in recovery. And helping others takes us out of ourselves. And like Bill W. says in the last sentence, he's been given a quiet place and bright sunshine. That's a place that I want to be. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you, Angela. Jimmy, I'd love to throw it back to you before I close. Do you have any kind of closing thoughts or anything that you wanted to share before we close it down tonight?
Keep coming back. No. No, I mean, what I said, and it was great to be here tonight. And, there's I say that a lot. My sponsor says a lot, that alcoholism doesn't come in a bottle. It comes in my mind. And I could, in any 24-hour period, I could be so delusional on so many things. And, so this idea of emotional sobriety, that's a delusion right there, that I could be, emotionally sober 24/7. And that's not reality, But what we want to do what I want to do is attain that place where I'm always striving for that, and I think that's what our real goal here is, and to, give it away in abundance. That's the deal, so that's all I have. I'm just real happy to be here tonight. I'm not used to Zoom anymore. We're going to so many in-person meetings. So now with the Zoom, it's like back to like day one again. So it's kind of weird.
Well, thank you so much, Jimmy. And I want to come and see you in Neptune again sometime soon. Friends, I put in the chat the Dropbox link. If you want to watch any of the shares from the last year plus of this meeting, you can find them there. And in the next couple days, I think the talk from tonight should be in the Dropbox. I know definitely I want to go back and Jimmy re-listen to some of the things that you shared. Just a lot of meat there. And so thank you. The way that